Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is part one of our Care Defender Wellness Series, an exclusive here at the Cherry Hill Free Clinic during the month of September. Steps for Care. We are going 20 million steps this month together as a community to unlock a sponsor's donation for Cherry Hill Free Clinic. And this series is designed to enhance your experience through the Steps for Care Challenge to get the most out of it. I am joined here by Dr. Hannah Lawman, who's a health psychologist with almost 20 years of experience helping people to be more active and eat healthy. So if there's anybody in our community that's going to help you, it's Dr. Hannah Lawman. So I'm so glad that she's here joining us today. Today's topic of discussion is small steps, big impact, how walking transforms health. Dr. Hannah, thank you so much. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. And it's really exciting to see the community coming together and supporting each other with something as simple and as important as more walking.
Yeah. So speaking of more walking, I did like 5 miles today. So
Congrats.
did you get your steps in yet, Hannah?
Actually, no, not yet. I've not gotten them in yet. But I will get them in today because it is such a beautiful day.
Well, speaking of a beautiful day, tell us about the beautiful day that you decided to be a health psychologist. And what is that?
Good question. So, psychology is kind of the study of human behavior. And if you put the health in front of it, it means I'm really focusing on how I can help people with healthier behaviors. And a lot of that is more physical activity, eating healthier, sleep and stress management, all those things that we know we want to do and we try to do, but sometimes it's a little hard, especially in an environment that makes it harder on us. So that's been my focus. I've always been interested in health and decided to focus on this part of health psychology.
So you're not originally from here, right? So maybe your veins aren't filled with green goo and you don't yell "Go Birds" everywhere. Where do you hail from?
Contraire, I am an Eagles fan to the core.
Love it. Love
Go
it.
Birds. But originally, I'm from Tennessee. So growing up, it was always SEC football. And so then I didn't have a pro team really when I moved to Philly. So it was very easy to become a Philadelphia sports fan. But grew up in Tennessee and got my PhD at the University of South Carolina and then landed in Philadelphia at Temple and fell in love. And it's home now. I've been here for 14 years almost.
Oh, nice. Nice. Well, what are some of the things that, you've enjoyed doing while you're here just to stay active and just like our topic, small steps with big impact? What does Dr. Hannah do that kind of meshes all those things together?
Yeah, great question. And this is where, everyone will have to find what's most enjoyable and exciting to them. For me, I love being outside and I love being in nature. So I like going on walks in parks. I'm a big hiker. So I try to get out and go hiking. And then those are kind of two of the big ways. And then I also do a little bit of stationary bike for days that maybe I'm feeling a little less motivated, but I still want to do something. So I can kind of get on the bike, sit there, maybe watch a favorite episode or something, and still get in my exercise in an easier way.
Nice. What are some of the most surprising health benefits of walking that most people maybe don't realize? Because I'm assuming this has been such up your alley for so long that you must have some golden nuggets that most people just don't know about.
I think most people know about the big health benefit and like most of the health benefits of activity, right? You're reducing your risk of your cardiovascular risk, you're reducing your risk of heart disease. The mental health component, I think maybe is underappreciated, but I think once people hear it, it can help with mood, help you feel relaxed, especially too if it combined with nature. That also has been shown in some of our science to improve our mental health. But I think people enjoy it and feel that when they're out there being active. Maybe some of the surprising newer research that's still a little building is kind of the impact and benefit on our cognition. So maybe folks don't know something. I won't go as far as to say preventing Alzheimer's because I don't think the research is there yet. Improving cognition and reducing your risk for some of the dementia or other kinds of things maybe is a more surprising benefit of getting in your recommended physical activity.
Wow. So mental cognition. And so, we heard after the COVID time, right? And even though we might still be in that, this was a huge impact on some people that were recovering from COVID. Brain fog is oftentimes what you hear. Is this helpful for those people kind of going through that?
So I'm not aware of any studies that looking exactly at brain fog and long COVID and kind of physical activity, but just the whole body of research on how helpful physical activity is to our physical health, our mental health, and some of these cognitive functioning aspects. I wouldn't be surprised if it's helpful. So I think it definitely won't hurt, and hopefully would help too.
Interesting. Okay. So we have a couple questions that were submitted here that I want to go through that our audience of steppers and larger community could probably benefit from. So first one is, how does walking compare to other forms of exercise when it comes to long-term health?
So I think the benefit of walking in comparison to other activities is that it's free. You can do it anywhere. It's relatively easy to do. You can dial it up, dial it down, walk faster, walk slower, walk uphill, walk flat. You can customize it. And so there's less barriers to doing it. That means there's a bigger chance that you can kind of stick to it and stick to it long term and get it added in, as compared to maybe some of the other activities that maybe require special equipment, or maybe there's a cost to doing them. Or maybe if it's a team, you need other people to do them, things like that. So I think the biggest benefit of walking is that it's so easy to do. And really the best thing for your health is getting in your activity, and walking is one of the best ways to do that.
Okay. Why does walking with others somehow feel different or less of a challenge? And why does it make such a difference compared to walking alone?
I think that goes for kind of physical activity and exercise in general, and a lot of other things. We are, as humans, are social beings. And so having social support, having that community around us, having that extra accountability, that extra kind of support from the folks around us, it can help us reach our goals. And the same is true with walking. So one of my favorite things to do is go with one of my friends on a walk, and we catch up. And so rather than, maybe going and doing another activity or another way to catch up, we like to go out walking. And so it really brings in that social aspect and can help us meet our goals for all of those reasons. And so that's where any of these kinds of challenges or other ways to build social support around your physical activity and walking goals is going to help you reach your goal.
So it doesn't matter if I get, for example, my steps in all at once or like broken up through the day. Is there any difference at all, any benefit, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter. You can do it whichever way works for you. And there are studies showing that if you get in bouts of physical activity that equal the same amount as one, it gives you just as much health benefit. And actually, if you're just starting out, or maybe you have some joint pain, or maybe you have some other concerns about injury with walking, breaking it up into smaller bouts is a way to tackle that. So start small, break it up into smaller bouts, and then build over time if you want. But either way that works for you, you're going to get the same health benefit.
I like that you spoke on injury, joint pain. So for people that do have those kinds of limitations, how can they still benefit from walking safely? And what are some techniques or things that they might not be thinking about that they should be to kind of protect them from exacerbating that injury or making it worse?
Yeah, that's a good one. And that's one of the reasons why I like walking, because there's a lower risk of injury with that compared to some other types of activities or sports or things like that, where injuries may be slightly more likely. Still, overall, you're going to get that health benefit. So just engaging in walking, and then, listen to your body. You want to try to warm up, maybe do some stretching, also reduces likelihood of injury, and then take it slow. You can just start with maybe 10 minutes 3 times a week, and that is enough to get you started. And then as you do that for, a couple of weeks, and you're feeling that is something that you can handle, then you can bump it up to maybe 20 minutes and see how that goes. So start small. You don't need to push yourself to so hard. I think there's a bit of a misnomer that exercise doesn't count if you're not sweating, or if you're not out of breath, or you're not able to talk. it all counts, even light physical activity. You want to try to eventually get up to kind of a moderate level where talking, you might be a little bit more out of breath talking, but you don't need to start there. And so if you're having some joint pain or maybe some stability problems, start slow. I know my grandmother, she was working with a physical therapist, and her starting was just walking down the hallway and back. And so really start slow, obviously for someone who's in their mid 90s and working on trying to build up some strength again, you want to start really small. And then of course, everyone at the clinic is there to support you. So if you have concerns, you can talk to your doctor about, ways to stay safe during activity.
That is awesome and probably very, very helpful to a lot of people who are, in that position. So what are some easy ways to then add even more steps into, like, say, a busy day, if especially not feeling overwhelmed? Oh my God, I got to get this all in at once. Or like, is there a way people can tie it into their normal day to day where it doesn't really feel like a giant task? It just kind of blends into their routine.
Yeah, great question. I call this lifestyle activity, right? So this is the idea to park in the furthest away parking spot and to take the stairs instead of the elevator, and to do these other little things throughout the day that, kind of you think of it in your mind as making life a little less convenient, right? Because so much of our life is so convenient that we don't need to walk. So let's try to make life a little less convenient so that we can get our walking in without having to maybe plan, that hour or that 30 minutes all at once, but just parking at the end of the parking lot, taking the stairs, making sure to stand up and maybe walk around the office if you're every hour, if you're sitting down, or when you're home now working remote these days, setting a timer to make sure you're getting up and getting some of these things in, or carrying a water bottle around that you're having to remember to refill and get up and walk to refill it. Those little ways to get more activity in.
Awesome. So we do have a guest that would like to ask a question live. Please unmute yourself and come on over.
Hey, listen, thank you so much for this. I mean, even as Dr. Jabril here at the Free Clinic, even for me as a primary care provider, right? Just hearing you mention some of those key things, simple but really eye-opening, like parking further out, taking the stairs. I mean, these are key things. And one of the things that often strikes me, especially in seeing patients at the Cherry Hill Free Clinic, is that, as you might imagine, life happens, right? Especially for some of our patients who work multiple jobs, going from one shift into another, and seeing that people go, where is the time to do this, right? And as a primary care doc, I'm going, yes, nutrition, rest is key, right? But what you mentioned there about finding ways to fit it in, and then most importantly, the mental health benefit of it. I mean, that was just yeah, that was and in those cases where people are going through a hard time, being able to benefit from to have other benefits of walking is just key. But here's my question, and it's one that patients would often ask me as well: is there an ideal number of steps, right, per day for health? And the USPSTF from a primary care standpoint talks about 150 minutes of exercise per week, right? And I often tell people to walk their way up to it, but I want to, this is something I'd love to hear from you about.
Yeah, well, you're right. I think it's the 150 minutes is the goal, the recommendation of what we want to try to get to eventually. We can build up to that. And that relates to about 10,000 steps today. But you can kind of check, everyone has a different pace. So I think that's a good target to get to. The 10,000 steps a day, 150 minutes a week. We show the biggest benefit in health when people who are mostly sedentary, not really getting out and doing much activity, starting to do that first little bit. That's where you see the largest gains in health compared to someone who maybe is getting in 300 minutes already, and them getting in another 350 minutes is a little less of a benefit, is more or less of a benefit compared to that person just going from 0 to 50. So those gains are really in that first bit of getting active and getting going. And that's why getting in something, these little bits here and there, is so important.
Thank you for that. One of the other things that came to mind is I often I treat a fair amount of chronic diseases, hypertension, diabetes. And what you said about the 10,000 steps goal is really interesting. I know as being one of the participants in our Steps for Care Challenge, I was kind of blown away by just doing my basics of walking here and there, how many thousands of steps that amounted to. And so, no, that is 10, that's a target. Some of us like data like that just to aim for.
Yeah, I notice a big difference on days when I'm working from home and I'm really not getting in as many steps as I need to, and I have to make a concerted effort. Whereas days where I'm out and working in the office and going out and doing visits, I actually get in my steps much more easily those days. And so that's another good strategy. Sometimes we rely too much on willpower, right? Like, I just have to make myself go to the gym. I just have to have enough willpower. I just have to make it that important. But we want to try to set up our environment so that willpower is not as big of a factor, right? We want to have our environment set us up for success. So these are the kinds of things where, packing your gym bag in advance and putting it in the office, or a change of clothes, even if you're not going to the gym and you just want to go for a walk after work, because after work you're going to be tired and the chances of you getting changed and going back out once you get home are lower. So that's an idea of setting yourself up for success with your environment around you, or making plans with friends that are more active, or driving a different route home from work where you're going by one of your favorite parks or something like that. So these are ways that you don't have to rely so much on willpower. You want to try to set your environment up so that it's cueing you to do those things that you want to do, because so many things in our environment cue us in the opposite way. They cue us to go through the drive-through. They cue us to pick up the mail when we're driving in the driveway instead of walking back. Like, our environment cues us to be sedentary. So our challenge is, let's shake it up. Let's see how we can set up our environment to cue us to be more active and rely less on that willpower.
Wow, that's I never thought about that. Just these things, it reminds me of it was eye-opening conversation I had with you in our Fit for Life program when we were going to launch it. And we talked about having food readily available to participants in that program. And you're like, no, that's actually what we're sort of engineered for, is all this food being available and all this snacks. And that's counter to what's good for us. So, another question that came to mind here is there's been some things I've read about like bundling, addiction bundling, sometimes it's called, doing this. I think you mentioned walking with, catching up with a friend. But any thoughts, or even just recommendations about that, of doing this with walking, or that's maybe might help us be more successful at it as we embark on it?
I think the answer somewhat depends on where you're starting. So I would say, if you're someone that is really just trying to get started with a regular walking activity, I would say just focus on small steps, get in some 10-minute bouts, think of those 150 minutes or those 10,000 steps as your eventual goal, and keep it simple. So as a psychologist, sometimes we find that if we're trying to do too many things, we can get overwhelmed by it. And so if you're just starting out and it feels a little bit, of a big goal, keep it simple, get those, 10-minute bouts in, for example, get that lifestyle activity in, for example. But if you're trying to figure out ways to do that, one of the recommendations for building habits is to pair it with something that you always do. So maybe that's what you're talking about with bundling, and kind of pairing it together with something that you always do as a cue to help make you more likely to remember it or more likely to do it. So that can be a strategy to do that. So if you're, let's say, always walking to the cafeteria for lunch, and you always have a normal route, then instead you're going to cue yourself when you walk to your lunch and going a different way to get in more steps, or something, cueing it with something of, remembering to take your medication when you brush your teeth, or whatever it is, something that you do every day to pair it together. So that can be a tip to building habits, is to pair it with something that you're always doing. But also, let's remember to not overwhelm ourselves too much. Our SMART goals, keep them specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. So those are the ways behaviorally that we can try to set goals that we're more likely to achieve.
Awesome. That's awesome. Sorry, I know I'm almost taking a lot of time on this, but one last thing I was gonna throw in there is I've been astounded in seeing patients who have done steps who walk to live a healthier life. I've been shocked by being able to reach a target heart rate zone. And we always talk about one of the things in exercise physiology, 220 minus your age as your maximum heart rate. And I've seen some folks who just some remarkable, people they come back to the office in 3, 6 months and they've lost 10, 15 pounds. And I go, what have you done? And they go, I walk, 2 miles after work or, 5 days a week. And I brisk walk enough to actually, and these are folks who are data minded, brisk walk enough to get my heart rate up in the 140s, 150s. I'm going, wow, you must be moving. And so any thoughts on that, Dr. Hannah? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because people think of weight loss as a benefit of physical activity or walking. But if it's only walking and physical activity, even if you're kind of doing a lot of it, you shouldn't expect much weight loss if that's the only change you're making. And the reason is because I like to say we can't outrun our mouths because it's so hard to get in enough steps and enough physical activity to counter the calories that we're eating if we're eating too many calories. So just walking alone or just doing exercise alone, even if you're spending an hour of vigorous activity in the gym every day, you might see a pound of weight loss or, maybe a couple pounds, but it's really pairing it with some of those other healthy eating habits, healthy sleeping habits. Those are the things that are going to actually cause the weight loss. And actually, for a subset of people, exercise can make them hungrier and they can actually feel like, oh, or I need to fuel up, or I just walked 3 miles. So now I need a lot of extra energy. But doing that can kind of backfire and that can cause weight gain. So we actually do see that for some people that are increasing their exercise, it makes them hungrier, then they're eating more and it can lead to that. Walking in and of itself, physical activity in and of itself is one of the best things you can do for your overall health, mental health, blood pressure, helping regulate blood sugars, improving sleep, cognition, like we talked about, reducing your cardiovascular risk. But weight loss is not one of those things that we should really expect from exercise alone. It's really pairing it with those other habits that tends to lead to the more clinically significant weight loss.
Good to know.
Thank you so much, Jabril. Those were amazing questions. And if you guys don't know, Dr. Jabril from the Cherry Hill Free Clinic, honored guest today. And if any of you have questions, there's several ways you can do that. Your registration link to have joined on this call, you could have asked your question there. You can ask it in the chat when you're on the call, or you can raise your hand and you'll be picked on to come on up and ask Dr. Hannah your question. So Dr. Hannah, I do have something to kind of go off of that you mentioned with willpower. I read a book called Willpower Doesn't Work by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And one of the premises of the book is, or they go into this study that I thought was really remarkable, where they took a number of elderly folks that were seemingly having a lot of pain in their joints, just their body just wore how they felt. And what they did in this experiment was they asked them what was the most exciting and hopeful and greatest part of their, time in the past. And they all cited a particular time frame. I believe it was in the, maybe even in the 60s or the 50s. And so what they did was they recreated that environment. They put them in an environment that had newspapers like it was back then, the furniture, everything. And what was interesting was after some time, they began to actually feel better. And they were talking as if those elections were still going on and the current events of that time were currently happening now. And he mentioned how just mentally putting yourself or accepting that you are this type of person has like this mind decides, body will follow type of philosophy. And so, when you mentioned willpower alone isn't going to be enough to get people through stuff like, oh, I just got to check this box and do these things today. It brought back, what I learned about in that book about how you have to actually mentally become someone different to make it part of your day so that it doesn't feel like it's work anymore. it just feels like this is naturally who I am. So I was curious about your comments about that and what you
Yeah.
thought about how to carry through with something like that.
I love the title of the book. And what caught my eye from the story that you told about that study was they changed the environment, right? So they set the environment in a way that made it easy for people to imagine themselves in that other time and that other space and doing that. So our environment really impacts us a lot. And not all of that is really within our control all of the time. So, sometimes we have to do the best that we can with what we're given. But any time that we can try to use our environment to help us set up for success, I think that's a way that helps us change that mental frame of reference to get to where we're going and take our cues. Some people may have seen maybe like a YouTube video. We say, oh, take the stairs more, take the stairs. But then, you're walking in SEPTA or New Jersey Transit and everyone's on the escalator and the staircase is just completely bare. And it's really hard to do. And the norm is to take the elevator. But then in the YouTube videos, they'll paint the stairs like a piano and have them make sounds. And then all of a sudden, everybody wants to take the stairs and play the piano. And it's our environment cueing us. And then we see everyone else doing it. And we're like, well, I want to do it, right? The social aspect of it. So we really, as much as we can, use our environment to help us, use our environment to get us into that, mental frame. It really helps.
Yeah, that's totally useful to know about. And a question I do have here that kind of aligns with that is I sometimes start strong and I'm walking, but then lose momentum. What's the best way to kind of make it a habit that actually lasts? I know we touched on this in a lot of various ways, but how can we bring it home in like a simple way here for this question?
Yeah, not to sound like a broken record, but you want to find the things that are exciting to you. If you're doing an activity and you find yourself dreading it, try something else. You don't have to make yourself do something that you don't want to do. You want to find something that's enjoyable to you. And maybe that changes. I used to love running and now I don't like running anymore. I used to dislike being on an exercise bike. And now I'm kind of like, oh, actually, I like the exercise bike more. So things change over time. Go with it. Don't force yourself into doing something because that's just going to make it harder for you to stick with it. So find the things you love, use your environment to help set you up for success, build that social support, find those friends that are going to help you in those positive ways. And that can kind of add some motivation if you're feeling dragging, or get in some of that lifestyle activity, add more of that. If you're finding that you're not able to dedicate as much to, a specific walking time or specific activity time, you can build in more physical activity throughout your day, playing with grandkids or taking them to the park or something like that.
Awesome. I think we do have one more question from a guest, and go ahead and unmute and come on back up.
Okay, yes, Dr. Hannah was gonna just this is a follow-up to Mustafa's the last question. So I've tried a few things, right, through my wellness journey, right? Some have failed, and now I really am getting fired up to do this walking challenge. What do you there's a lot out there about if you're able to sustain it for a new habit for a month, 90 days, right? But as you've talked about some of the things that can help us be successful at it, what's that time I should expect to, well, that's maybe a tricky question, but what's that time where, okay, by this time, it's a new habit is being born. And what do you,
So I think this one is a little tricky because it's something that probably you're going to have to think about. Like, our environment is set up to kind of make us a bit more sedentary. And it's something we're going to probably for most of our lives have to work on. And even if you have a habit, life happens and it can throw you off track. There isn't, I don't think, a quick, as long as you do it for 3 months, then it's going to become easy. Unfortunately not. Like, life happens. And now we have to figure out, like, how can we respond to that and maybe adjust, pick a different activity or try something else. So I would say we should expect that we're going to have little slips along the way, times or weeks in our lives where it's just hectic and we fall out of our habit. And how can we keep that slip from becoming a fall, right? How can we say, oh, I'm off track. Let me figure out how to get back on track. And that's kind of a lifelong effort. That's a part of a lifelong healthy lifestyle. And over time, it will get easier as it turns more into a habit. But it's something that probably for most of us, we're going to always have to be a little bit vigilant about and and be on guard for, even though as we build in habits over time, it does get easier and easier.
Thank you for that. You know, patients, sometimes when I share personal stories with patients at the free clinic, and you alluded to this earlier, we're all different, right? You know, there's things that will fire one person up and not the other. But for me, I always share that cycling is my choice of
Mhm.
weekly, daily exercise, right? And one of the things that got me hooked for me was data, being able to go, oh my God, I'm going at, 18 miles an hour right now. And my heart rate is it's in the 140s. Oh my God, I'm going at 20 miles an hour. And my heart rate is, oh my God, 150s. I'm going uphill. And that just sort of does it for me. And now, you find yourself at a place where when life happens, right? Like you mentioned, right? Because life's gonna life, right? And we are gonna get thrown off. Where I find myself going, oh, I can't wait to get back to do this to get some reprieve and just some relief. And that I think is where I was like, you know what? I think this is my thing because it's not work to do. Yeah, I can't wait to do it. But thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And you mentioned, Dr. Hannah, that you don't like running anymore. So if you don't mind, could we dive into some of your story? And I think some of the viewers might actually find some relatable pieces in there on how you went through your journey, both from a habits perspective of physical fitness, but also, nutrition and just overall health. So tell us what got you into running? Why did you even try it? How did you start it? And why did you transition away from it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I kind of enjoyed running when I was in college, and it was something easy to do. I found it challenging and enjoyable. And I ran my very first half marathon in Philadelphia when I was finishing grad school. And I was so pumped and so excited to do my first my first half marathon, and loved it. And I did another one and enjoyed that, maybe a couple years later, and was kind of regularly running. I found the challenge very exciting. And then one half marathon I signed up for, I didn't train very well for it. Maybe I was a little too proud or thought I could do it. There was more snow that winter. So like I didn't want to get out running because it was snowing. And so I went on my third half marathon. It was maybe 40-degree rain the entire time. And I just found it miserable. And I was, I didn't train well, so I was in pain. And after that, I just said, you know what? I don't enjoy this anymore. I'm gonna take a break. I don't want to do this anymore. So I gave running a break. And then over time I said, you know what? Actually, I don't enjoy it as much anymore. I'm getting older. My joints are it's like more painful for me to run. And a couple of times after that, I would try to run and like my hip would hurt and my knee would hurt. And I was like, you know what? I don't need to just make myself do this anymore. And I started doing a different activity. I got more into like lifting, doing like low weights and more lifting. And then I started doing that. That fell out after COVID. I got out of the habit of that. And now I'm doing, like I said, more of the stationary bike. So I think like you just kind of have to recognize these things in yourself and try something different, and find a way to tackle some of these roadblocks that life throws our way.
When you were lifting, maybe some people might find some interest in this. Do you believe that's something that could replace the movement of walking, or are they two completely different styles of exercise that feed different areas of our physical lives?
Yeah, so this is aerobic training, which is a little bit better for the small amount of weight management that we might see from exercise. Maybe a little bit better for some of the cardiovascular types of activity, and then resistance training like weightlifting or things like that. So really, you want to get in both, and especially for older adults, kind of trying to work in some of that resistance training in small ways. Maybe with bands or with body work, even sitting and standing, some of that to help maintain muscle strength. and, build balance. So ideally you want to do both, but, don't put too many constraints on yourself. All activity counts, right? We do want to keep it simple. So do whatever works for you. For this particular style of lifting, it was low weight, high reps. So there was a cardio component to it as well. But really, you just got to find what you're excited about and what keeps you going and what keeps you coming back to getting in those minutes of physical activity, however works best for you.
Yeah, I'm seeing a thread here in a lot of your answers is go towards excitement. Whenever in the military, we had this like way of psyching ourselves out in basic training, because it's the worst thing. And we would always say like, embrace the suck, just embrace it, right? Like accept that it's going to suck and just embrace and go through with it. And it had this way of just bonding us together, but also making us feel like this is going to be okay. And then we'll find the tiniest things to enjoy about it. Maybe it's, what kind of meal you're going to have that day, or, maybe, or even as simple as the weather or the types of animals we're going to see today. Embracing the suck, I think, is a great way to kind of wrap around all of that. But outside in the civilian world, of course, go towards joy sounds a lot better. But it is ultimately embracing what's going to be difficult by finding what you enjoy in it and going towards that. And I love that theme that you keep highlighting here, and it makes sense with habit building. So take us back. Do you remember, like, when was the first time you realized that health and fitness really mattered personally to you? I mean, some people, it takes like a big event or a wake up call at the doctor's office to finally start taking it seriously. What was that moment for you?
I don't have as exciting of a story around a particular moment for me. I was always an active kid and grew up in Tennessee. My grandparents had a farm. I was always out, kind of out playing around. But it kind of has evolved over the different periods of my life. And this was what I studied when I was getting my doctorate, studying health psychology. And so the more I learned about it, the more excited I got about it, the more you want to live that as well. It's important to you. You see all of the data about how important it is to be active and have those healthy habits. And so you really want to try to live that yourself. So I think it's not an exciting moment in time really, but kind of a journey for me where it just is becoming more important. You see how important it is as you're aging and you're feeling your joints change and you're not feeling as young as you were. And you start to see that it really is important to stay active and keep that. And you want to have the best quality of life you can as you age. And physical activity is really one of the best ways that you can do that.
Was there ever a patient story that maybe completely changed the way you think about lifestyle habits or walking? Like you have the way you thought about it, and then suddenly something happened with the patient that changed that? Is there a moment that ever happened like that influenced your thinking or maybe even how you administered types of advice to patients?
I think I learned something from almost every patient that I work with. And that's where it really is a journey together to try to figure out what's going to work for them, for their lives. I've had one patient story in particular that sticks out to me where there was a lot of mental health challenges with this patient. And this patient had some trauma in his past. And it was really at the root of some of the challenges with his lifestyle that he was really trying to work on changing, and some abuse in his past. So I think this really teaches all of us that, you never know what somebody else is going through. You never know kind of what might be at the root of some of these difficult or hard to change habits. And you want to give grace and be compassionate, both to ourselves when we're trying to do the things that we want to do, trying to increase our activity or trying to eat healthy, as well as to others that, on the outside, maybe they don't appear to be healthy, but maybe they're trying and maybe there's reasons why, and give grace to them. So I really learned something from all the patients that I work with. They're inspiring. And it's part of just kind of learning to support each other in this path to becoming more active and getting more steps in.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Okay. This question is really interesting. Can you share a time when you yourself struggle to stay consistent with a habit, and also how you got back on track. Like, what was the easiest way that you found? And if you could go back, what would you do again if you fell off and want to get back on?
Well, this might not be a surprise, but it was really during COVID, totally fell off the wagon. I was probably in the best shape of my life doing the weightlifting that I loved, going like clockwork. I had my habit in, stopped after work. I walked to work, walked home, stopped at the gym, did my class, was feeling great, and then COVID happened and it threw me off my game and I fell off the wagon. To be honest, I'm still not back to where I was like before COVID. But what I have done is, I have a group of friends. We go hiking every year and we take a big hiking trip. And so that's my time every year where I try to train and prepare and get ready for that. I have that, I'm feeling good afterwards. And I try to hold on to that as long as I can to make sure that it's a way regularly for me to try to get back in touch and make sure I'm prioritizing. But it's something that I have to think about every day. And sometimes I miss it. Sometimes, or, I miss getting in my activity. But then I tried to set up my environment, respond to changes as I can, build in, these things that we've been talking about. But, even for me, it's a challenge sometimes.
Thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure, all of us have traumatic things that happen in our lives, whether it's outside of our families, like something like COVID, or within our families, like, loss of a loved one or an illness or a debilitating injury, loss of a career. So any of these stressors, I think what you just spoke on kind of speaks to, or applies to basically anybody that goes through something like that and has to find a way to rebound to be able to continue on with their health goals. And so can you speak on how that level of like resiliency, like how do you build that resiliency up so you can be adaptable to the stressors that come in life and find ways to make it work for your goals?
Yeah, I mean, that's $1 million question that the science of psychology is still working towards, right? How can two people experience the same type of stressor or trauma? One is able to find and have that resiliency, and the other one, maybe the trauma takes them down a darker path. And so, I think we don't fully, there's no prescription or sure set of things that is going to work to kind of make sure that we're always resilient, but it's going to look different for each person. And so kind of figuring out what is it for you that helps you feel inspired. A lot of people are inspired by their faith. A lot of people are inspired by their friends and their social support system, or, other ways. So I think it's going to look different for each person, and, lean into that, try to figure out what works for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. I think that's incredibly helpful. As we wrap up here, we have 9 minutes left. So if you have any last minute questions, putting them in the chat now is your chance, or raise your hand and we can call on you. But as we kind of wind down here, I'd love to do some rapid fire questions with you, Dr. Hannah, to see if you can help us tie some more in here with not only habits, but learning a little bit more about you and how you've kind of gone through these. So you ready?
I'm ready.
So if you could take a long walk anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Woo! Love hiking in mountains and snow-capped mountains with beautiful lakes. So maybe the Alps for that.
Oh, that sounds nice. Very nice. You did mention you go usually walks with friends and hikes. What do you do when you go by yourself? What are you listening to? And do you have, actually, this might even go into something that someone else might wants to know, like different times of day to walk and precautions to take and where you're walking. But yeah, let's start off with when you're not with your friends, what do you like to listen to?
Depends on my mood. Sometimes I'm in a music mood, sometimes I'm in an audiobook mood, and sometimes I'm in a listen to nothing and just tune in to nature and be present mood. So it just depends.
Okay, so let's segue into the settings, right? Like if you're going out, what time of day should you be concerned about, or what should you be concerned about based on the time of day that you're going out for a walk? Outdoors, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, from a health perspective, Any time of day works. So it could do what works best for you. Don't feel like you have to go in the morning because, that's when it's going to be the best for your body or something like that. So any time of day works for getting in your activity. Do what works for you. Obviously, if you're walking in places where maybe there's safety concerns, you want to stay alert for cars. If there's going to be cars around or depending on, the neighborhood setting, you want to take all of your normal safety precautions there. But any time of day that you want to do your physical activity is great from a health perspective.
Great, great. And just to kind of add on to that, like I when I go, I put these AirPods in my ear, and they have this special noise canceling feature, right? And sometimes the place I'm going through is busy and noisy, and I realized it's probably not the greatest to walk around with noise cancellation, just because you're not going to hear the cars that are coming by, or somebody's calling out to you to tell you to watch out for something. And so thankfully, if you're somebody that has noise canceling headphones, there is a feature, at least in these ones, that can pick up on when you're talking. I don't know if it's jaw movement or something, and it kind of expands the sound so that you can hear your surroundings. It thinks you're having a conversation. So just a tip there, I think is worth sharing. And then also, if you're, concerned about safety, just little pepper spray type of deals. These are great for wild animals. It's probably nice to think about some things like these on top of visibility. Right? Are you wearing something bright enough for that time of day? Are cars going to be able to see you? Are you close to the road? Are you in a place that's secluded? Is there adequate lighting? Do you look like a target? So is there anything you would like to share around just the safety component of it that you usually take or that you recommend others to take when going out on walks?
I think this kind of gets into more being alert of your surroundings and not going down alleys that look dark or things like that. And then going with someone, right? I think going and walking with someone else, walking in a group, those are ways that if we're worried about safety or walking somewhere where we, are concerned about that, walking in groups is a great way to feel more safe.
That's great. Definitely the group thing. Definitely harder to do in today's world as we get older, I think.
Yep.
In community and things like that is so, so valuable. So hopefully everybody's finding community right now inside of the Steps for Care Challenge, meeting up or just virtually supporting each other, going on more walks. So Dr. Hannah, do you have any kind of funny or unexpected stories from a walk? Or maybe it's like, I don't know, getting lost or a surprise encounter with anything, whether it be nature or otherwise, or just an aha moment you had, entertain us a little.
Maybe I'm not the most entertaining person, but I can remember on one of my hikes, we had gone on a long hike over several days, my group of friends. This was actually up in Canada, and everyone was saying how we needed to be looking out for bears, and we were all carrying bear spray, and we'd seen signs along on our hike that there were bears, that none of us had seen one on our hike yet. And sure enough, on the last mile of the hike, we're walking through where we thought, we're not going to see anything. It was in the winter, it was a ski resort. There was tons of people around, so we're thinking, this is done. And then all of a sudden, someone yells up to us and says, "Look out, there's a bear and her cubs." And so it was not too close. We were still safe, but then we all had to get on our bear spray, and we all walk in a group and be careful and warn everyone else. And then all further in a distance, there was another bear. So it was funny that here we thought we were done. The hardest part of the hike was over, no bears. And in the last mile, we saw 4 of them.
Oh my, and a bear with its cubs. That's the real one you should watch out for.
Yes. Stay away.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that turned out well and you're still here with it. So
there was a big group, yeah. So it was you got to be alert.
So what you're saying was you were at least faster than some of them.
I think actually there's research that shows there's much less likely to be a bear attack in groups of 4 or more. So the bears get more deterred.
That's good. I think one last thing I want to bring some attention to is tracking. We've been talking about steps, right? But I don't know, maybe somebody's thinking we're walking around with a piece of paper and putting a notch on it for every 10 steps we take. So what are some ways you track your steps? I think you have an Apple Watch, I believe. And so what are some of the easy ways, maybe even before, I don't know, Apple Watch has been around for probably over a decade and a half now. But if this is something that some people are not interested in wearing, what are some other options out there? And what, Of course, the folks inside of Steps for Care are tracking through their phone, but outside of that, what are some alternative ways to do that?
Yeah, good question. Because as a psychologist, anytime I'm trying to help someone change a behavior, whether that's walking, whether that's eating patterns, whether that's how they're sleeping, whether that's how they're feeling, the first thing I want to work with them to do is help them bring more attention to what the current pattern is. And one of the best ways to do that is tracking or self monitoring. So, keeping track of what you're currently doing, even just as a baseline first to know, well, where am I starting from? Where do I want to get to? And how can you get there? So, tracking is a great way to help us with changing any behavior event that we're working on changing. For keeping track of our activity, if we don't have a wearable or don't want to use a wearable, just the number of minutes even might be easier to track than steps. Keeping track for 150 minutes a week, and so you can track on paper the old-fashioned way. There's also pretty inexpensive pedometers that don't have any of the other features or bells and whistles. Sometimes actually I find my watch a distraction. So maybe just a simple pedometer that's inexpensive can work to track your steps. And then obviously lots of apps in your phone, and your phone itself has a fancy pedometer, we'll call it, called an accelerometer. A pedometer or old-fashioned pen and paper or minutes to track minutes a day if you don't have steps.
Yeah, that sounds like there's a lot of options out there that make it really easy. And the old adage is
What gets measured gets managed.
gets managed. Right, right. And you can't manage something if you're not measuring it. And so
Exactly.
that fits directly in with that. So as we wrap up here, I want to thank everybody who made it on the call. And if you're watching on the replay, thank you for participating inside of Steps for Care. And if you're not, you can do that now at chfc.us/step. It's completely free. No donation required. Donations are appreciated, and they do help our mission here at Cherry Hill Free Clinic to serve the uninsured for free. And if you choose to make a donation, we do have some extra bonuses and stuff for you, including being able to come on these calls live and ask your questions. This is part one of our series, the Care Defender Wellness Series. So Dr. Hannah, what are some parting words you'd like to leave us with here to wrap up our topic? Small steps, big impact. What are some parting pieces of wisdom?
I'll just end with let's get out there one step at a time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So please join us, guys, on our next one. We're going to be having these calls one a week. So this one will be next week. Keep tuned to your email where we're going to announce the date and time for the next one. We try to vary these calls to make sure that everybody has a chance to get on live. If you're watching this after the fact and you'd love to join the Step Challenge, please help us hit 20 million steps together. You're going to help yourself get healthier. And if we hit the 20 million steps by the end of September, we unlock a sponsorship for Cherry Hill Free Clinic, and that goes directly towards helping patients get seen, patients who don't have insurance, don't have anywhere else to go. We are a nonprofit primary care office just for them. And also, if we hit our 20 million steps, everybody that participated gets a free slice of pizza from our friends over at Basilico Pizzeria. And as you heard on this call, one slice of pizza is not going to negate all a month's worth of steps. So go ahead and do that with us. And then we can celebrate at the end of the month. Just like Dr. Hannah said, make it part of your lifestyle. We don't have to be rigid here. Go towards joy, go towards excitement, and let's make these habits easy, fun, and accessible for ourselves and supported by the environment that we create. So Dr. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us, and everybody else who's watching. And we will catch you guys inside of the Challenge app. Again, to join at chfc.us/step. Thank you, everybody.